Thank you for joining our webinar, How to Fight Brand Abuse on Social Media. My name is Brian Costello, Marketing Manager for MarkMonitor, and I'm excited to be joined by my colleague, Aquino Chicada, Portfolio Marketing Director for MarkMonitor. Today, we will discuss how to identify brand abuse on social pages, usernames, and posts, how tactics evolving in ever-changing social media landscape, and what you can do to help remediate abuse. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Aquino, to our presentation.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone, and thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar. So as Brian said, we're going to talk about social media today, but I generally like to start with a quote. So here's a quote for you today. A brand is no longer what we tell the consumer it is what consumers tell each other it is. So Scott Cook is the co-founder of Intuit, and I just thought that this quote was really appropriate for today's topic of social media, especially as we look at how consumers influence and all the different social media activities that takes place. I definitely want to clarify that brands play an important role in shaping consumers' perception of a brand, but there's definitely a lot of influence that consumers hold as they share their experiences of a brand online. So today, we'll talk about the following three things. I'll give a general landscape of social media, and then we'll talk about the various challenges that brand owners experience in the social media space. I'll give a few examples, so those are the kind of things that you should be looking out for and enforcing. And last but certainly not least, we'll talk about best practices. So to start off, I wanted to take a look at the big picture. So a customer's brand experience is really important to make sure that it's consistent and seamless across all the different channels, whether it's online or offline. And what I mean by online, that could be websites, that could be social media, mobile apps, paid search, you name it. You just want to make sure that you have and can offer that consistent experience. If a consumer or customer of yours goes to an online store through your website and then your offline or your physical store, but then has a really negative experience through your mobile app store, that will definitely impact their experience. So just keep that in mind. And unfortunately, fraudsters, if they want, they're always looking to capitalize and leverage other people's success. So if their intent is to commit a scam and leverage your particular brand, it's unfortunate, but they'll tackle or they'll choose your weakest link. So make sure that as you think about a brand protection strategy, that you really have a comprehensive approach and that you should be looking at brand protection, not just one channel, but across all channels. But today we're going to talk about social media, so let's focus on that. Social media continues to be relevant, and I have some stats over here to kind of prove that point. 80% of consumers' purchasing decisions are influenced by their friends' social media posts. In fact, I was actually reading this article recently where it was talking about one of the social media trends is that Gen Z, so Gen Z are those that are born from mid-90s to early 2000s, is 2 to 3 times more likely to be influenced by social media than by sales or discounts. In fact, that they are the only generation to value social media over price. So to me, that's kind of really surprising, but it does also kind of echo the fact that social media plays an important role, highly influential, and especially to the younger generation, it's an important part. 71% of consumers who have had a good social media service experience with a brand are likely to recommend it to others. And the other stat here is there are 2.56 billion global mobile social media users and 1 million new active mobile social users added every day. And note that this is obviously a moving target, so by now this number is much higher. But I wanted to share these statistics because I wanted to highlight that consumers promote messages about your brand almost as ambassadors. So as they're talking about your brand, whether they're sharing out coupons, discount codes, a link, their user experience, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that everything they're sharing is actually legitimate and that they're not accidentally sending out fake coupons or fake promotions, because that will inevitably have a negative experience for them. Here's a slide where we talk about social media numbers. As we all know, social media continues to grow and grow quickly. So on the left-hand side, what you'll see is a chart with the various social media channels. Of course, there are a lot more social media platforms out there, but this is the one that I grabbed. And these numbers are as of end of last year. So today there are over 3 billion active social media users, and 91% of retail brands use 2 or more social media channels, and 81% of small and medium businesses use more social platforms. So one tip or one advice I would give at this point is usually social media in the world of business is handled by the marketing department. So as brand owners, work closely with that marketing department, identify who's responsible for your social media, and work closely with them. I know that social media specialists tend to focus on promoting a brand, promoting offers, managing discussions, but if you work with them and kind of talk about trademark, copyright abuse, the various things that, you know, the various different activities that could potentially be harmful to a brand, that's really important, and they could be a huge asset to you. So let's talk about the different challenges of social media and what we've seen and what our clients are experiencing on the social media platform. I have a list of issues, and I'm going to share examples of each one of these, ranging from counterfeit, impersonation, fraudulent links, so we'll talk about phishing pages, fake special offers. Freedom of speech and new social media sites are actually a little different in nature, but still somewhat painful from a brand owner's perspective, because those are still challenges that we need to deal with. So I'll save them towards the end to talk about. Let's start off with counterfeit. So for those of you who don't know, Mark Monitor sends out or publishes an annual online shopping behavior report every year. And this latest report showed a few statistics that I kind of wanted to share with you guys. And we survey over, well, we work with a third-party research agency, and they survey over 3,000 consumers globally. So here are some statistics. 91% claim they would never buy a fake. 34% say they have been duped into buying a fake product, and 86% of consumers believe brands should be doing more. So I think these numbers are pretty telling and pretty staggering. People mostly don't want to buy a fake. They are well-intentioned and they want to buy the legitimate product. They also really rely on brand owners to be doing more to protect them. So as we think about that, and I know many brand owners do a lot to try to protect consumers on the social media channel, unfortunately, counterfeiting remains a major business problem. Counterfeiters see social media as a haven, and it's so easy between likes and retweets to spread the word fast. It's really hard to manage that. And also counterfeiters like to leverage and take advantage of fan pages or even create impersonating pages and either insert themselves in conversations and promote a counterfeit link, or the impersonating page is designed so that they can drive traffic towards the counterfeit pages and products. So it's definitely something worth monitoring and enforcing and making sure you have a comprehensive brand protection program over that. They are also, counterfeiters transact on social media sites or even outside of the social media sites. And again, this all really impacts your brand. So let's take a look at a few examples. So I got an example, and I got a few examples across various platforms. On the left-hand side, you'll see a few examples from Instagram, and you'll notice that it has replica underscore and a brand name. Now, that's a low-hanging fruit. If you're out there and trying to figure out, right, how could I start looking for counterfeit? Well, using the search term replica or even copy, those are obviously the ones where they're telling customers up front that this is not the real product. And that's a low-hanging fruit. You should be going through those and enforcing accordingly. Of course, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of well-intentioned consumers, and they're just out there trying to find the best possible deal, right? But their intention is to actually buy the legitimate product. So they might be using terms like cheap or discounts. So those are additional terminologies that you might want to consider when you're doing a search of your product on social media, because a lot of the times counterfeiters use those terminologies to try to get consumers to their sites, not your legitimate sites. Another type of abuse that you should be aware of is fraudulent scams. So I'm defining phishing scams where a fraudster is looking to steal credentials, so not necessarily promoting a counterfeit site, but their intent is to try to steal, whether it's like an email address or something personal information about you or about the consumer. So fraudsters typically do this by inserting themselves in a conversation. They may create impersonating sites. They also use hashtag phishing scams. And I'll share some examples in the next slides to explain what these are. The one thing that is not really clear when it comes to fraud is that we don't always know how fraudsters monetize stolen credentials. They might be selling those credentials in the dark web or whatnot, but it's still a serious issue that really impacts consumers directly, and you definitely don't want to be associated with fraudulent scams. So it is something that brand owners should definitely keep an eye out on. So here are some examples. On the left-hand side, this is what we call hashtag phishing. So you'll see the post says, who's familiar with, and this is a bank name that I had to mask out, interested in 5K, double tap. And then if you look at the writing below, it says, if you bank with X Bank, you can make $5,000 cash now. Must have your online account info, text me now, and there's a phone number. And basically, it's promoting people, advertising that you can make fast cash, $5,000, just text me now. And it's part of a money laundering scheme. It's obviously fraudulent, but unfortunately, there are people who might just associate, oh, hey, I bank with this bank and I'm really desperate for money, so they might fall victims to such a trap. So it's something that you should keep an eye out on and definitely enforce against. On the right-hand side, you'll see another example, and this is more of a chat, but you'll see that this person is impersonating a bank's representative and is trying to get this person to share their bank account information and password. Thankfully, this person did not fall victim to it, and he said absolutely not, and he was promoting that information to showcase that, hey, this illegal activity is happening. But I know fraud is typically associated with banks or financial institutions. The one trend that we've been seeing since 2014 is a major increase of fraudulent scams, or fraudsters also sending out phishing scams to non-financial institutions. So if your brand has an email account or a password, an e-commerce site, then you're automatically potentially vulnerable to fraudsters trying to take advantage and send out phishing scams to your prospects. So definitely keep an eye out on that. On that note, impersonation isn't always for phishing purposes, and to answer my own question here, is impersonation hurtful? Yes, impersonation can be very hurtful. And the reason why is because it moves transactions away from authorized and legitimate pages. So you always want to be driving traffic to the legit site, and you always want to make sure that no one's taking advantage of your brand, right? So the one thing that the one tip I will give at this point is don't have fewer likes on your official page than an impersonator. Make sure that your page is the legitimate page. Get your page verified. It's pretty straightforward and easy to do, definitely worth doing so that you're distinguishing your social media page and making sure that people understand that your site is the legitimate one. Because otherwise it can cause lots of dangers. Likes and retweets, unfortunately, especially if they have like a fake promotion going on that's very attractive, you know, these numbers of followers and likes can really spiral and increase quickly. And we definitely don't want, as I've mentioned over and over again, we definitely don't want counterfeiters or fraudsters to divert traffic to their site. You want them to keep them to your site. So here are some examples of impersonation. On the left-hand side, it's an Instagram example of a bikini brand, and the trick they used here was that they used an underscore right before the brand name. So they're trying to make it seem like they are that particular brand, but it's not. And then they say, first 1,000 people to follow will get a free bikini. And they're trying to increase their number of followers that way. On the right-hand side, you'll see Facebook impersonating site, and what's scary about this one is that you see there's over 100,000, so 122,335 people like this page, and at a glance it could look and seem very legitimate. And again, this isn't what you want to be. You don't want your brand to have impersonating pages that look rather legitimate with a really high number of likes. That's definitely not what you want to do, so keep an eye out on these impersonating sites. Now, this other major problem is fake special offers, and why this is especially dangerous is because everyone's always looking for a good deal. I know I am also when I'm shopping, right? So whenever there's a fake special offer, sometimes they look incredibly realistic, and people also naturally and inherently want to believe that it's real. So unfortunately, the speed of spread is outstanding, and it's not always clear and easy to identify, especially at a glance, whether or not it's real or fake. And then if you're not always aligned with your marketing department, you might, as a brand owner, you might not realize that the promotion's actually not a real promotion. You might actually think, oh yeah, my marketing department is sending out a promotion. So that is something that you could definitely work with your marketing team to make sure, and something that your marketing team can be aware of. The other challenge is that a lot of the times, these kind of promotions, they come and go quickly. So it might be up for 2-3 hours on Facebook, and then 2-3 hours on a different platform, and it's harder for brand owners to track and enforce. But still something to be very aware of, because as I've mentioned before, like consumers, they trust and rely on brand owners to help them. And if they fall victim to it and they don't, and they're coupon isn't honored, then they get very disappointed, right? So it's definitely something worth keeping an eye out on. So here's an example, 2 examples of fake special offers. On the left-hand side, it's a YouTube video on basically promoting discounts to sporting goods. And then on the right-hand side, it's a bikini company, and it says first 1,000 followers to give a shout out will be entered into drawing to win $1,000 worth of swimwear products. So all very enticing. People do tend to gravitate towards offers, so definitely stay tuned and be aware of these. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about freedom of speech. There's a major distinction between freedom of speech and something that is, you know, a trademark or copyright abuse. And one thing that's really important is get to know every platform that you have an official presence on and make sure you truly understand the terms and conditions. Use that to your advantage, because if you know, for anything that is trademark and copyright abuse or anything that is against that social media's policies, those are all enforceable. But something like freedom of speech or, you know, negative remarks is not enforceable. And in fact, my recommendation would be don't fight it. We should actually be encouraging people to discuss and promote their thoughts and experiences about a brand. So you should be embracing it. I know that sometimes there are posts that is super tempting to take down or hide, but again, if you're trying to convince a colleague who is desperate to take a post down, but it's just simply freedom of speech, the silver lining that you could tell them is product and company opinions can really be helpful to improve and, you know, look at it as an opportunity rather than a negative comment. So, you know, use it as business intelligence, if anything. Also, you probably don't want to be the brand that picks on the little people, as in let people talk, express themselves, and try not to be aggressive or defensive. Let them express themselves and let them speak freely. I think those are very important, and people really respect that. So something to definitely be aware of. So my advice here is monitor and only take careful and discreet action, especially if it's just freedom of speech and sentiments being expressed. And, you know, there is a big difference between actual infringements versus negative comments. So the other business challenge is new social media sites. It's so hard to keep up with all these new platforms that keep coming up. And of course, I mean, we live in a world where resources are not unlimited. So with limited resources, we do have to prioritize what we monitor and what we don't monitor. So my recommendation here is, while it's impossible to really monitor everything, right, across all the different social media platforms and all the different channels, to prioritize based on where you know your consumers are. So pick a few of your key official social media channels and focus on those. That's where you want to make sure that you have a solid brand protection program in place. And for the newer ones, stay tuned, be aware, because things tend to shift. Your consumers might actually move from one platform to another. So stay tuned and be aware of all the new sites that come up and proactively register handles for it. So there are some social media sites that is first comes, first served, and you want to make sure that fraudsters or counterfeiters aren't abusing it, so make sure that you do register and at least get the basics done. And then occasionally monitor for them. Also work with your marketing team to make sure that, you know, if your consumers are starting to shift from one platform to the next, that you are also staying aligned and having a cohesive brand protection program in place accordingly. So let's talk about best practices. What can you do? What are things that you can start doing for your brand? So in case you don't have this already, make sure you have a policy in place. Internally for your staff and externally if you have third-party members and partners who are selling your products, make sure you have a policy in place. You definitely don't want rogue staff or employees going around and, you know, doing rogue things on social media. And then also for partners, I'll talk about this more in depth in the next slide, but you want to make sure that they're managing their social media based on your policies and also that they're promoting your product in the approved channels. Also have a strategy for where you want to be seen and understand how much official exposure you have. Again, you can't really boil the ocean here, so prioritization is really important. And as mentioned earlier, get your page verified on social media platforms. It's relatively straightforward and easy to do, and it will distinguish your brand so that there is no confusion. Proactively register your brand on new social media sites and monitor what is happening on social media in your name. Regardless of who is doing this, you should know your presence. So even like you will want to distinguish between those that you're monitoring a lot and on a daily basis and maybe those that you do on a monthly basis and maybe those on a more sporadically. But also leverage technology. I know that's, most of you probably already do that, but leverage technology because a lot of it, you can automate a lot of this and implement best practices. Now let's talk about your partners on social media, especially for those of you who have partners or affiliates. Having that policy in place will really help and clarify and, you know, reduce risks of misunderstanding. Usually your partners are in for the best intentions and, you know, you're trying to build a win-win relationship with your partners. So set them up for success. And a good way to do that is by establishing a template that is easy and clear so that your affiliates are representing your brand exactly the same way that you want them to. So are there particular social media platforms that they're allowed or not allowed to be promoting your products on? What are things that they need to put to show that they are unauthorized sellers? Are they linking to the appropriate pages? All of that should be clearly established for them. You want to ensure traffic is sent to your home page for e-commerce or at least approved affiliate destinations. Again, you don't want like a counterfeiter to get in there and start confusing your consumers. You want them to be very clear, and you do want to spot check your partners occasionally. You should also monitor their sites to ensure links to sites selling counterfeits or sites which are unaffiliated and seeking traffic. They don't post those links. Very important, so spot check them. And that's important to do, not because you don't trust them, but because counterfeiters and fraudsters can be very sneaky. And at the end of the day, your partner's reputation is also your reputation. So if they're representing your brand, you want to make sure that it's done properly. So just to wrap things up, protect your consumers by proactively monitoring and enforcing against brand abuse, whether it's counterfeit, impersonation, fraud, fake promotions. whatnot, you do want to make sure that you are proactively protecting your consumers. Second, make sure your partners are compliant with your social media guidelines. And last, don't just monitor one platform or one channel. Take an omni-channel approach to brand protection. So with that, Brian, over back to you for questions.
Thank you, Aquino, for a great presentation. As promised, we will take the next 10 minutes to answer your questions. If you have a question for Aquino, please type your question into either the chat or Q&A tabs in the WebEx platform. You'll find them up in the top right-hand corner. Also, please be reminded, if we don't get to your question today, we will be sure to follow up with afterwards. So our first question, Aquino, is how do I verify my page on social media?
Sorry, I had myself on mute. Sorry, so to get your page verified on social media is actually pretty straightforward. Each platform will have like guidelines and they'll have clear directions. And then depending on the social media platform, but often there's like a check mark and it's a good way to distinguish it. I will note and say that unfortunately some fraudsters or counterfeiters, they're becoming really sneaky. So they're actually like creating pictures and posting like a little check mark to seem like they are a verified account. And again, this all plays part of impersonation, but a lot of the times they don't do a really good job, and it's pretty obvious that it's like a mock-up or an attempt to get people to fall. But it is definitely an important step, and one that a lot of users, social media users, do recognize and look at it.
Great. And so how do you prioritize which social media platforms you need to focus on?
Yeah, so, and you know, we all wish we had unlimited amount of resources, right? We all wish we could be monitoring everything at all times. But the reality is resources are limited. So my advice is really focus on where most of your consumers are going, which social media platforms they use, where are they most engaged and active. And if you focus on that and then make that at least daily monitoring, then do that. And then sporadically and depending on how much resources you have, definitely keep an eye out on other social media platforms, but have a lighter version, right? So if you can, do a weekly, monthly, or even quarterly, but check and make sure that no fraudsters are taking advantage. Because unfortunately, fraudsters always try to attack or take advantage using the weakest link. So whether, you know, even within social media, they'll try to find your weakest brand protection program so that they could just leverage that and try to get as many consumers following and driving traffic away from your legitimate site.
Great. We've received a number of questions. Does MarkMonitor have any plans to provide a platform to monitor social media for fake accounts?
Yeah, MarkMonitor offers a social media module and technology as well as services, so absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. And what would be the best way for someone that's interested in that product to get in touch with the folks at MarkMonitor?
So, well, after this call, after this webinar, we'll be more than happy to reach out to you and have someone contact you and then kind of walk you through our value proposition and talk more about what we do. So we could definitely have that conversation.
Yeah, so there's actually a question in the survey at the end of the webinar that will automatically come up as you exit the webinar that says, would you like to be contacted by MarkMonitor? Just click yes on that, and a sales and marketing person will follow up with you and can help you learn more about the MarkMonitor products. How do we, next question, Aquino, how do we keep pace with all the new social media handles, and why do we need to be proactive registering for them?
Yeah, so this is where I think use your marketing team, right? Especially if you're in-house counsel or you're in the legal team. Work with your marketing team, because usually marketing teams will either have a dedicated person or someone who's actually doing some social media activity, and they ask them to always keep you in the loop with any new social media platforms that come up, and then together you guys could register for handles. And the reason why is because a lot of these platforms, it's not necessarily just because you own the trademark rights that you automatically get those handles. Some are really based on first come, first serve. So if that's their policy, then you just want to make sure that you have those rights, right? So if and when you choose that you actually do want to have an official presence on that platform, you don't have to go and fight for that handle. The other reason is because you just don't want counterfeiters or fraudsters to register those handles on behalf of you, right? You want to block them. So if you register, then you're kind of, in a way, blocking them and preventing them from being able to take those best handles.
So good offense is key.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Brian.
You bet, you bet. And, you know, you showed a slide earlier in the presentation with a lot of different social media channels. Does Mark Monitor cover all of these? You know, what is the footprint?
Yeah, so in terms of our Mark Monitor social media coverage, you know, again, we work with our client, and we prioritize based on what we think or what they think, where we see their most consumers and where there's most activity, and we try to prioritize based on that. So if, for example, your client base has most presence on Facebook and so Facebook, Twitter, you know, YouTube, then those are the ones we will prioritize. But in terms of our coverage, we do cover all of the main social media platforms, and we also cover millions of blogs and forums. So we definitely try to make sure that we work with you guys and come up with a prioritized plan.
Okay, great. And our final question for today is our CEO, not our CEO, but this is the question. Our CEO is concerned with people making fake profiles of the CEO. Does the product help stop that? Would Mark Monitor be a tool that could prevent that?
Yeah, so actually, that is a common problem that keeps coming up, where they'll create impersonating pages of your C-level executive, especially CEO level. And yes, that is something that we can help with, and we'll be monitoring and trying to take action. So yes.
Okay, fantastic. So if you want to talk with Mark Monitor a little bit more, feel free to utilize the survey and click yes, and we will definitely follow up with you. If we did not get to your question today, we will also follow up with you in that capacity as well. And before we close out, Aquino, do you have any final remarks based on some of the things that were coming in on the chat, or anything else that you wanted to close with?
Not at all, but please reach out to us, and you know, we really appreciate your time. I know it's not easy to always find us 40 minutes or an hour, so I appreciate you taking the time. And if you have any specific follow-up questions, I'm always available, so feel free to contact me as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Aquino, for a great presentation, great conversation today on how to fight brand abuse on social media. As mentioned earlier, please take a few minutes and complete our brief survey. It'll automatically come up as you exit the webinar. We'd love to hear your feedback on our presentation, and look for more great content coming from Mark Monitor. That will conclude our webinar for today, and have a great day.